Your colleague Dan tipped me off earlier this week that you're in fact a huge fan of debate. Where does this passion stem from?
Yeah, I spent most of my high school doing debate.
Okay.
It was the team that I was on, and I started freshman year and spent an incredible amount of time preparing for the annual topic and competing throughout the state and sometimes throughout the country. And it was just my main activity in high school outside of my academics.
And do you ever use that in your career today? Do you find that skill useful?
It is. It is a skill that is useful because the fundamental skill of debate is critical thinking and analysis. And it's to hear something and to react to it relatively quickly and to assess the truthfulness of it and to question the validity of it and to be able to sometimes argue both sides of it, because a lot of the debates, you'd go to a tournament, there'd be 8 rounds and 4 times you'd be arguing one side and the other 4 times you would be arguing the other side. Yeah. So you had to see both sides and be able to advance an argument. And that translates through to just so many things that you do. You need to know, in my business in investing, you're buying a stock and someone else is selling a stock. Well, right there, that's like a debate, right? Is the stock going to go up or is it going to go down? Yeah. So being able to have a skill that you've honed on being able to argue both sides of that proposition allows you to sometimes be able to look at something and say, okay, this is the side that I'm picking on this particular argument.
Yep. Have you ever had that instance kind of where you're picking a stock and you've had a complete change of mind and a reversal in the approach that you initially took?
Yeah, we're wrong all the time.
Okay.
I shouldn't say we're wrong all the time, but we're wrong often. And we have to constantly question whether we're wrong. And so there's lots of times that come along where you buy a stock and then a certain amount of time happens or different events happen and you have to look at it a different way and say, nope, sorry, that was it. We should have done the opposite of what we did. And then you change course.
And then how did you get started with the business, and how did you take Greenlight from the 2-man operation that you started with to the huge hedge fund that it is today?
A lot of it was due to really not having a lot of planning, but being able to be in a particular situation, in my case, getting also then a fair amount of good fortune, and then adjusting to the circumstances that were there and making what I think turned out to be good decisions.
Okay.
And so, I had the happenstance of, being at a fund where I got some good training, and then also at the same time realizing at a point relatively early in my career that I didn't really have a long-term future there. Yeah. And so the fellow who was in the office next to me kind of had the same view about his career, and we went out for coffee one day and decided to walk out and start our own. And 3 weeks after that, we were in the snow in January in Manhattan looking for like a Starbucks to sit in to make some phone calls to people and get the business started. And we did not have enormous aspirations, but we felt that the way the industry is set up, there's very low barriers to entry, and we felt that even with a small amount of money, if we could do a good job with it, we could make a good enough income stream that we would have a satisfactory life. And I never in a million years would have guessed that the thing would have turned out the way that it has.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was never an aspiration. It just worked out that way.
I mean, great that it did, right?
Very lucky.
Yeah. So if you had to say there was one sole reason for Greenlight's success, what would you pin it down to if you had to pick one?
If I had to pick one, I think it's critical thinking skill. Mm-hmm. And it's the ability to look at a situation and see it for what it is, which isn't necessarily what is presented to you. And when something makes sense, to figure out what makes sense, and when something doesn't make sense, to question it, to challenge it, to look at it from a different way, and to often come to the opposite conclusion. And you don't have to do that very often, because most of the time when someone tells you something and it makes sense, it just makes sense, and that's that. But sometimes it really doesn't make sense, or there's another side to it. And when you can come to a view, maybe just a few times a year, where you have an important difference of opinion with what everybody else is thinking about a particular situation, if you can figure that out and figure out that it's important, we've been able to make a small number of large investments that the vast majority of the time have worked out very well, because we really have had an important difference of opinion between what we think and whoever's on the other side of that transaction when we enter it.
Okay,